if you see a woman or a child being attacked on the street, are you the guy that's going to jump in to do something to defend them? And if you're a coward, don't jump in. If you're afraid for yourself more than them, don't jump in, but at least go get the help of somebody who will.
All right, welcome back. Another episode of the Ignite the King podcast. I'm Dr. Michael Diamond.
I am G. Russell Reynolds.
Yes, you are, sir.
G is an abbreviation of my first name, not a title like doctor, but it's still cool.
He's a G. He's a G.
OG.
Man, we are coming off quite a weekend, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring the men into the world of MDS, Mastro Defense System, the training we did, how that really ties into this warrior season we're in, and values and value systems and making decisions and embodying the warrior spirit. So we have a lot to cover today.
Yeah. I was grateful for you and some of the brothers in the Ignite Brotherhood to come and experience that. I've been training Mastro Defense System for some 7 years now, I think. And I'm a level 2 instructor with MDS under Fred. And obviously a local mentor, Cliff Odette, who's the head of Mastro Defense System North America. He's a level 3 instructor. There's only 4 levels for those of you who don't know. And at level 4, you're pretty much John Wick. But Fred Mastro himself came to the United States from Belgium to teach this seminar. And while I was not able to do very much due to recovering from a car accident, I was able to observe and give instruction. It was so great for you guys to have that opportunity to experience Fred firsthand in MDS and what it's really all about, the essence from the source. And as you've shared, it was a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah. For those of you out there that have no idea what MDS is, Mastro Defense System, Fred's from Belgium. So people in the United States don't know him as well, but he's been involved in Secret Service, executive protection, SWAT, police, all types of training. And what I know, and I'll say just from like a layman's perspective, it is the most effective tool for survival in a street situation, to be able to get out of danger and go home alive. And one distinction I really want men to get, because, there's that distinction between this is a martial art and it's not, but then it's not even a fighting system, it's a defense system. Correct. And what I learned and really took home was, when you're able to get out of that initial attack or whatever the situation is, then it's about going home. So it was real humbling in that way.
Yeah, we are not there to fight. We are there to survive and go home. And it is a self-defense system. Yes, it's close quarters combatants, but very good distinction, Michael, that, a lot of people like to talk about traditional martial arts, which are based in culture and history. And like, this is the way we've done it for 300 years. And I'm like, good for you, Sparky. People don't fight today the way they did 300 years ago. Why wouldn't you evolve?
Yeah, and he made that point, I remember, over the weekend. You
got the other people who were like, MMA is the best, boxing is the best, Muay Thai is the best, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And yes, they're all effective. And there are a lot of tools we use. Fred Mastro himself is a 2nd-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We don't deny any of those. We also recognize they're sports. They have rules. The street doesn't. And, you don't have the luxury of a ref that's going to stop the fight if you're getting your ass handed to you on the street. And I've seen a lot of videos of MMA fighters, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters who end up dead or in the hospital because they thought their sport fighting was going to work on somebody with a knife. Yeah. Different animal.
And that's one of the, if I could jump in, that was one of the beautiful things about Fred's teaching is it's all based on principle, biomechanics, as opposed to strength and resistance. Actually, what I found in the training was the more pressure or resistance I put into the system, the less effective the move actually became. And then the other piece was it wasn't just like, let's learn this series of moves. It's like, learn this initial sort of pattern interrupt, and then the moves are endless. And that really translated well. And I feel like I got a deeper level of learning with that. And then just the warrior spirit that he brought in, and knowing when you're going to step in, when you're not, deciding on that ahead of time, knowing if you're not the guy that's going to jump in and not waiting until you're in some situation. So his energy was fierce in that way. It was really cool.
Yeah, it's it's an incredible thing. And just the last point I'll make on the MMA thing, because I know a lot of you guys may be going, UFC, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, cool. They're, again, super effective. Lot to respect. I'm not taking anything away from them. But UFC and MMA champions like George St. Pierre have trained with Fred. Wanderlei Silva, Bob Sapp have all trained with Fred. So you have to ask yourself, why would a champion at the top of their game like that train with somebody like Fred? And it was one of them, I won't say which one, but one of them who said, look, when I'm fighting somebody in the ring or the octagon, I know who I'm fighting. I get to study his moves 3 months in advance, and we're going to go in there and try to take each other's heads off. But at the end, we hug and go home. On the street, I have no idea who I'm fighting. I don't know if there's one of them or 5 of them. They got knives, guns. All I know is everybody wants a shot at the champ, and I am terrified to walk down the street. Now, think about that. So they needed something that's going to work.
Well, that was the thing. A lot of the people in the room were varying ages, men, women, people of all physical capacities, and the moves work. That was the cool thing. As a man, you have to have a baseline set of not only skills, but mindset in those situations that when it's time to act, you're going to act. And so many men, I think this will tie into our values, sit on the fence and they're like a limp handshake and they don't know how to make a decision. And then in those moments where it could be a do or die, it's, do you freeze up? Do you engage? Do you fight? Do you protect? Do you embody that warrior spirit, that energy based on your values, based on your code that you live by? And then having the fucking moves to back it up, right?
Yeah. And I know that was one of your big takeaways when Fred said, listen, you got to know ahead of time, if you see a woman or a child being attacked on the street, are you the guy that's going to jump in to do something to defend them? And if you're a coward, don't jump in. If you're afraid for yourself more than them, don't jump in, but at least go get the help of somebody who will.
Right. Don't be the guy filming it on the side, right? What the fuck?
Yeah.
All right. That's another story for another day.
But that's that warrior spirit. And Fred is humble. He won't let anybody call him master or guru or anything like that. He's like, call me Fred or brother. That's it. And that's true with most of the toughest guys that I know. And you look at, we got to have dinner. Alex Rodriguez is the head of MDS Boston, head of MDS East Coast. And he's a boxing coach as well. Helped to train Jermaine Ortiz to fight against Lomachenko. And we actually got to have dinner with Jermaine and Jose Antonio Rivera, who is a 3-time world champion boxer. And they're the humblest, nicest guys in the world, soft-spoken. And they talked about their mission. And it was always about someone or something bigger than themselves, their family, their community, humanity. So that's the path of the warrior. The warrior will always sacrifice himself in service to the realm, right? In service to the greater good of his tribe, his kingdom, his family, whatever it may be. And pain is a necessary companion on the path of the warrior.
There's a couple of things I'd love to unpack in what you just said.
Go ahead.
The humility and the humbleness. We talk about king energy all the time, and that's the biggest thing is exchanging the ego for humility. And these guys that are, like you said, at the top of their game, badasses in their own right, and often those guys can be just the nicest, most down to earth, open-hearted, loving people. And there's the guys that aren't, and you know the difference, right?
Right.
So
saying in the martial arts is an empty barrel rings loudest. The guy who's making all the noise, talking all the smack, that's not the dangerous one. The one sitting quietly in the corner, maybe a slight grin at the corner of his mouth. That's the guy to worry about.
So this again starts tying into values. You talked about mission. That was the other thing I wanted to talk about. And one of the biggest values is living on mission. And I know for me, for a number of our men in our group, like that's a cornerstone of who we are as men, is like we need to live on mission. And the mission or the values then help define the mission, right? So there's like your borders and your standards and all of that. So this is really an important piece for men out there to start to get, is like, what is that mission you're serving? Because
Yeah.
We talk about the warrior not being connected to that. It really becomes the mercenary and lost, and just acting or reacting out of whatever the circumstance is because they don't stand for anything. So maybe we can unpack that a little further.
Absolutely. I just want to add one more piece about Fred Mastro for you guys listening. Fred Mastro has agreed to be our guest on this podcast in a future episode coming up soon. So we'll
look forward to that.
And also, Fred Mastro will be returning to the United States, to my home in Los Angeles, in first weekend of May 2025, for a 2-day seminar. And
we will definitely be talking more about that.
Yeah, an incredible opportunity. So we get to have him on a podcast, and we'll talk more about the upcoming seminar. But yeah, mission and
looking
values.
forward to that.
I think I've mentioned it, or we've mentioned it on a previous podcast. Sometimes our 4-day immersions, our Zoom calls with the Brotherhood and our podcasts all start to blur together in my mind.
Sure.
So
raising my hand on that one.
Yeah. A lot of men, they think about what they want to live for, right? And a lot of times for guys, it's their own personal gain. I want to live to be a millionaire. I want to live to, the house, the car, the whatever. And we've talked about that being one of the 5 pitfalls of men, right? The check boxes. But how many men know what they're willing to die for? And ask yourself that. If you're driving in your car, listen to this podcast right now. What are you willing to die for? And it better be something bigger than yourself. That's
Are you willing to die? I mean, you're going to die anyway.
Right.
But that was that thing with Fred, right? Are you willing to step in knowing that the potential consequence may be death?
Right.
And having
that's
accepted
one thing
that. And we talked about that with
Yeah.
Tyler on our previous podcast.
Right.
His viewpoint on that as well, right?
Yeah. And that was one of the things that Fred talked about at the seminar, that he decided a long time ago. A lot of guys are willing to fight. Right. They're even willing to get hurt. He's like, I'm willing to fucking die to accomplish my mission. That's a different mindset.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a scary man, because that's a man who has no boundaries.
Right.
There's
He's vicious.
There's a documentary, a short 20-minute documentary on Fred and just kind of his backstory. It's on YouTube. Maybe we can provide the link for that too. But, he talks about his first MMA fight back in the day, and is when all he knew was Silat. He had no ground training at all, and he got his ass kicked by a guy who outweighed him by over 100 pounds. But he never tapped. It went to a decision. He never quit. He never gave up. And at one point, the guy was like, I had your arm in a Kimura. I heard it start to crack. I was breaking your arm. And Fred's response was, I've got another one. And that's a different mindset. And he's like, I'm not the best. I'm not the strongest, but I am the most vicious.
Oh, yeah.
And he holds true to that. Not somebody you'd want to face in a dark alley. But
no.
Going back to our mindset, warrior mindset, what are you willing to die for? And that goes to, what are your beliefs? What are your values? Right?
Yeah.
And most men who are parents, they're willing to die for their family.
I would hope so.
What's that?
I would hope so.
Yeah. Well, and sadly, we've seen cases where they're not.
Right.
I saw a video, I think it was in London. There's a family, husband, wife, toddler, son, and I think they had another child in a stroller. And this woman, middle-aged woman, looks like their housekeeper, walks by and pulls out a butcher knife and slashes the toddler kid across the face. The dad realizes what happens, pulls the toddler out of danger, starts to lunge towards the woman. She holds the knife up and he retreats behind his family. It sickened me. Sickened me to watch that. And he didn't have that decision already made.
Right.
It's like we say, if your biggest goal going into a fight is to not get hit, you already lost. If your goal in protecting, and whatever your mission is, if your primary goal is to protect yourself, you've already lost. You have to be willing to sacrifice yourself.
Can we talk about how values now would influence that moment, right? Yeah. And the importance of that, because I want to start to drop into this. I know there's lots of ways to do value definition, value systems, look at, all of that. But in this warrior energy, it's like the code that part of you lives by. that won't bend or break for anyone. So what I see, one thing, and I'm curious what you see in this, like the purpose of values is it guides our decision making. It's what sets our boundaries, and it's how we build strong relationships. Because when you have your values aligned with someone in relationship, you don't have to be alike, because at the core of it, you guys are connected. Like my wife and I, we're very different in a lot of ways, but we align in our core values, which is a big reason why we work so well together. Where nowadays, especially with how people date, it's like you're matching a list of likes, but not necessarily of values. So I'm just curious what you see in all that.
Well, you talked about, we were on the call the other night, you talked about you have a list of family values. The natural health is a family value. And it's so important to have that, so you know what you stand for. Again, we talk about standards and boundaries. Like values are the building blocks of those walls.
Right.
And it's hugely important. And you also
the values would be more like the blueprint, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That the standards and boundaries hold. But
right.
Go ahead.
You asked a question. What were some of the family values that your father taught you, handed down to you? And Michael, I got to tell you, I didn't say anything at the time. That question rocked me a little bit because I couldn't think of any. And I was like, I don't know that my dad gave me family values. Now, I'm not saying he didn't. There's a lot of times when he wasn't there, and I have to really go back and go, what were the values that he taught me?
Yeah.
And if there were any lacking, because men, you may be in a similar situation where your dad wasn't really the best, leave it to beaver kind of father in the world. It's up to you. It's up to you to create those values for yourself, for your children, for your wife, for your family. It's up to you, right? And you have to set them in stone. And I just had my glasses on a second ago. I was looking up that Benjamin Franklin quote because I want to make sure I get it right. Those who would give up essential liberty for a little temporary safety deserve neither.
Yeah.
So what do you value? Do you value liberty? Do you value sovereignty? Do you value freedom? Because these are things that we say that we have as Americans, but, they're a little bit under attack as of late, if you haven't noticed. And that noose is getting tighter and tighter. So at what point do you stand up? At what point do you say, no, I'm not? Maybe it's medical sovereignty or freedom.
Yep.
We've certainly gone through that over the last several years, 2 or 3, right? Maybe it's the freedom. Again, we talk about being a warrior. If your woman doesn't feel safe walking next to you down the street because you couldn't, or even worse, wouldn't defend her if the need arose, what are your values?
Yeah, well, let's get into that a little bit, because what's the shadow that's going to show up for a man who doesn't have his values defined? I think men out there, you need to feel the consequence of not having this in place. And, as far as the warrior, you're going to show up as a coward. You're going to be a pushover. You're not going to have boundaries. People are going to be able to take advantage of you. And you're not going to have self-worth. You're not going to be able to hold your boundaries or energy. And that's going to be a major problem.
Right. It's when I was younger, as a kid growing up, I joked that I was scrawny, didn't play sports, didn't have good grades, bought my clothes at Nerds R Us, couldn't get a date if I paid for it, and got beat up as a hobby. And after getting beat up as a hobby for a long time, I decided one day, what's going to be the worst thing that happens if I fight back? I'm going to get my ass kicked. Well, that's already happening. So why the fuck not? And something switched.
Yeah.
Can you make that change? Right. So if you're afraid, and I'm relating to that story because I asked Alex, boxing coach, head of MDS Boston, for somebody, in boxing, somebody that's afraid to get punched in the face, what's the remedy? Get punched in the face. Get punched in the face more.
Yeah.
We have to lean into the pain. And look, we're all going to die anyway, most of us in unpleasant ways.
Ouch.
die for something worth dying for, right? If I'm dying defending the innocent, defending my woman, defending children, hell yeah. And then I died a death worthy of a hero. If you're cowering because you're afraid of the consequences to yourself because you haven't made pain an ally, well, then you've missed the mark as a warrior. So what is it that you're willing to stand for? What is it that is more important to you than comfort, than the absence of pain, than pain avoidance? What is that thing? Is it your health? Is it is there a financial standard that like you won't drop below? Is it again, physical, medical sovereignty, your freedoms, the right to say yes or no whenever you want? What is it? Is it seeing your family thrive? What's that thing?
Yeah. And just to even expand it further out, I'll just share personally for me, like adventure, fun, intimacy, togetherness, closeness,
love, laughter.
Yeah. Just to kind of start opening this, breathing this a little more. Like, it's not just like, what am I going to do if someone has a gun to my head? Like, what do I live for in my life? What do I stand for as a sovereign individual? Because your value system is connected to the larger system that we're all plugged into. And how do you want to experience that in the world? And how do you want to then show that in your family? And the question that you talked about of the family values, and it's like, well, you did have family values, maybe not directly from him or how you remember it from him, but your mother has a lot of family values, right, that have been passed down, right? So now it's just like, what do you want to live by? Like, what's important to you as a family energy, like system? It really comes back down to that system.
What's your code?
Exactly. Yeah. And in Ignite, we talk about the code of the night, right? Their way of living and what they live by. And it was loyalty and honor and courtesy and valor and nobility and fair play and all of these things that they embodied as a knight, as someone that was a protector.
Right.
And we need to start tapping back into that, man. This is too important. Too many families are suffering because there's no order, there's chaos. There isn't this value structure, this value system. Kids are just acting out because they're looking for where that structure, that boundary is. And if you don't provide it, there's chaos.
Yeah. And I love that you brought in the bright side of the light, as far as love, laughter, presence should be a value in your relationship. Right. Presence should be a value in your family with your children, because we talked about that the other night. Kids don't care how much money you make. They're not going to remember when they're adults the size of the toy that you bought them for Christmas. They're going to remember how often you showed up to their games.
100%.
They're going to remember how important and significant you made them feel by the way you looked into their eyes.
100%.
That's what they remember. So make that a value.
Yeah.
And your woman, same thing. How unfortunate, how sad, really, that we have digressed to a point where presence is both sitting on the same couch looking at our phones.
No.
With our face in the phones, side by side, yet miles apart. It's sad. It's sad. How about presence? And in my relationship, we've developed a safe word when we realize that's happening.
Actionable, coming in hot.
It's like, hey, my love tank's a little empty. I could use a refill. Something, whatever it may be for you, whatever you say. But it's like, create that awareness, because the phone is meant to hypnotize us. The phone is meant to hijack our dopamine and pull us away from presence, to numb us out to what's really happening in our lives.
Yeah, there's a new book I saw. I haven't read it yet, so I can't give commentary on it, but it was, I just saw it at a meeting I was at my son's school, and it's called The Anxious Generation, and basically how social media is rewiring the brain of children now, where they're it's an epidemic that they can't actually pull themselves out of the tangles of that addiction. It's really horrible.
You know, when we talk about apocalyptic possibilities of what's
Say that
happening
3
in the near
times.
future, we've been talking about a cyber attack. What's his name? Satan's agent. Oh yeah, Klaus Schwab. WEF has talked about this cyber attack is imminent and will make COVID look like a sneeze in terms of severity. The sad part is, if there's a cyber attack, a lot of people are probably going to die. I'll take probably out. A lot of people are going to die because you can't go to the bank, can't get your money out, can't go to the gas station, can't go, nothing. Everything that we know as comfort of society is going to cease to function. The bright side of that, if that happens, and God, I hope it doesn't, but maybe, just maybe, people will wake up from this hypnotic techno fog that has occupied our brains, and become present again to reality and to what really, really matters.
We'll talk about how the influence on values. Look what social media has done to the core American values. It's insane. The degradation of what people think is okay to say to others that they don't even know.
Right. And you know, yeah, obviously we can go off on a whole new episode with social media and the influence of all that crap.
Right.
Going back to our values in the warrior is, we also talked about pain, right? Warriors lean into pain. They accept pain as an ally on their journey. Man, how often are you living in pain avoidance?
It's worse.
Like, oh, well, I don't want to go to the gym because I'm sore. Get your ass up and go to the fucking gym.
Right.
You're sore? Good. Keep training. Right. And this is one of the things that, again, talking to world champion boxers, they're up at 3:00 in the morning if they have to be, to go to the gym before anybody else is even awake, so that they can shower and then go to work, spend a full day at work, take the bus home, shower, change, and go back to the gym, train their ass off, and then come home, grab a bite to eat, go to bed, start all over again the next day. Same thing. And if that's what they had to do, that's what they did.
Yep. Seems impossible till it's done.
Discipline. Yeah. Discipline, work ethic, leaning into pain.
Yeah. That was the thing, with the MDS seminar. I know we were joking about it on our call. You're saying how much I was smiling getting hit by Fred Mastro. But it's like, I wanted to feel on a few levels, but I wanted to feel the pain of this, because I know in my life, like, it's like this flinch or avoidance of like, ow, that might hurt. And it's like, okay, maybe it does or it doesn't, but I'm not scared of it. And that's a big fucking difference of embodying that warrior energy. It's like, okay, yeah, I want to feel what it feels like almost passing out. I want to know, I want to register that in my nervous system so I can be attuned to that. If I avoid trying to feel everything, then I have no practice. And that's like our immune systems, right? Like, you can be in this sterile environment. So if your immune system doesn't have any practice, you're going to fucking die because it has nothing to work on.
Right.
It needs to get stimulated. It needs to work. It needs to fight some battles.
Right.
So I really appreciate that, just kind of tying our whole episode in here together. But on that path, as you said, you will encounter pain. You will encounter places just internally that are uncomfortable that you're going to have to overcome.
Right.
That's the point of transformation. That's literally what the word transformation means, to make, to change shape, to change order. That's what the word means. So, that hurts sometimes.
There's that cliche saying that everything you want is on the other side of fear. We've all heard that. Well, same is true with pain. Everything you want is on the other side of pain. Are you willing to walk through it?
Right.
It's gonna hurt. Growth hurts. Growing pains, right? There's no growth without pain.
Yeah.
Are you willing to feel the pain? And usually, guys, that thing that we're so afraid of being the pain, on the other side of it, there's elation. We've had guys in the Brotherhood who had never been in a fight before. So there may not have been a Fight Club kind of moment where we created that opportunity. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And guys who had never been in a fight before were scared shitless before the fight began. They were elated afterwards and go, that was awesome. I got punched right in the face. Now, obviously, this is not bare knuckle, like nobody got hurt.
Right.
But even if it's a boxing match, it's a sparring match, you got headgear on, you got boxing gloves on, so nobody gets hurt. When you're on the other side of that, they're like, oh my God, that was amazing.
Hey, and you talked about pain avoidance before. You know, there's a point you have to get to. It's like, I'm going to just feel it anyway. I'm going to have that conversation. I'm going to look in the checkbook. I'm going to look under the hood. I'm going to face what I got to face. And 9 times out of 10, it's never as bad as you think it was, how you built it up to be. And my father taught me that a long time ago. He would say things are never as good or as bad as they seem. I thought that was kind of neutral, but in the sense of like, things are never as bad as you think they're going to be, right? And that's where the mind can go awry. That's when we don't have this value system and this structure in place. We just are flip-flopping all over the place and, you know, moving in the wind, and we're not grounded to anything. And that's painful. That's really painful. That avoidance, that kind of avoidance.
Yeah. Yeah. So, men, listening to this, what do you value more than comfort? What do you value more than complacency, more than stagnation, more than staying safe? What are you willing to stand up for? What are you willing to fight for? What are you willing to live for? What are you willing to die for? Are you willing to live the life and even die the death, if necessary, of a hero to make your life have meaning? Right? We're not suggesting anybody signs up for a death mission, right? That's not the point.
We do have the Warrior Immersion coming up, by the way. I think it was a good time to plug that.
After I mentioned death, great. Nobody will die at the Warrior Immersion, I promise.
But seriously, if you're interested.
Yeah. It's for anybody who's ever been in a confrontation, physical confrontation, or even an argumentative confrontation. When you look somebody in the eyes and you see fear in their eyes, you got this. You know it. When you look somebody in the eyes and you see this is a man who is not afraid to die, you're like, oh shit, I may have bitten off more than I can chew. So how can you have that energy, that essence, that pre-decision made that this is who I am and where I'm willing to go and what I'm willing to do to defend my values, to defend my family, to defend what really fucking matters?
Yeah.
When you do that, you become unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. Love that. I mean, I'll just pile on as we're starting to wrap up here with this. It's important to be asking yourself these questions. I think we said earlier in the episode, there's lots of formats to do values processes. But just like Russell brought up the question that we had asked to our men of, you know, what were the values you grew up with? What were the values that your father instilled in you? What's important to you? What guides you in your decision making? What are those cornerstones of what you stand for that you don't break for anyone? And if you haven't asked yourself that question, it's time to start asking yourself those questions, especially those of you men out there with families, young families, where you're going to be tested. You're going to have to deal with lots of things, trauma, challenges, things. Anyone listening to this will have to deal with this. So values and having these things in place are those guide stones to your decision making, to your boundaries, to how powerful your relationships are going to be. Otherwise, you are going to get knocked around by life. You are going to get easily pushed around. You tendency to be in a pleaser mode or the martyr and just like accepting whatever because you haven't stood for anything. And as Russell so eloquently said, you know, we're in a time where it's like you have to stand for your freedom now. You have to stand for your sovereignty. No one is going to give it to you. In fact, it is being actively taken away from you, taken away from us. And we have to recognize that. Like, where do you stand your ground? What is the hill that you die on? Don't wait until you're on that hill to ask yourself that question. Mm-hmm. That's a big part of what we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. Do it now while you're lucid, while you have your faculties, while you're not in a stressful situation. Now's the time.
Oh. That's a beautiful note to close on, man. Well done.
Thank you. I think that's it. Yeah. Ask yourself those questions, men. And I will say we do have our Warrior Immersion where we do a 3.5 day beautifully curated intensive here in Austin, Texas. And if it interests you to dive into the deep end of your inner work and to join us, you can apply and we will have a conversation to see if it's a match to come. Reply, send us a message, go to ignitetheking.com. You can book a call there. And as always, like, subscribe, share this episode with those that you love. Aho.
See you next time, man.